Marginalised communities and nations worldwide struggle to overcome colonial mindsets and digital curation environments that keep their cultural heritage preservation at the margins. And I think the key thing here is that in order to reclaim the telling of its history, Barbados has launched a self-contained cultural heritage preservation and data analysis ecosystem project. Saving Barbados' critical genealogical, governmental and transatlantic slave trade records has now taken center stage, initiating a network of information management practitioners to digitally and physically protect these records. This talk will really contextualise the programme, review aspects of the planning and discuss some innovative work being done by Bajans to derive meaning from digitised content. We're really pleased to have with us our two speakers who will be presenting a joint presentation, Jerrell Jones and Dr. John Connor Mulligan. Jerrell Jones is a librarian, digitisation specialist, professional photographer, and fine artist with over 12 years of experience in academic research library. Currently, as digital initiatives coordinator at Rice University, Jones leads digital project facilitation and management, offers training and provides strategic guidance on digital humanities projects across the university. He provides project management for the redesign of slavevoyages.org. He also provided digitisation and archives consultation for the Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny Road programme in Barbados. His professional interests centre on supporting the information needs of marginalised communities, digital preservation, community archiving advocacy, and fostering international collaborative initiatives. John Connor Mulligan is a humanities computing researcher currently leading the digitisation efforts at the Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny programme Road, whose goal is the digital transformation of Barbados' cultural heritage sector. This work involves training local professionals to build a one-of-a-kind digital archive that leverages local knowledge and open source library science software to leapfrog legacy institutions in the global north, and providing local scholars with the ability to use and make more of their national cultural patrimony by marrying human expertise and automated technologies in an informating paradigm, as Adam Liu puts it. Mulligan has published in MIT's Leonardo, the British Medical Journal's Medical Humanities, Oxford University Press Notes and Queries, and ACN's Practice and Experience in Advanced Research Computing. He was the technical lead on slavevoyages.org for 4 years, where he helped the project to win multiple awards and grants. I think clearly we've got two wonderful speakers this afternoon, and I know that they're both going to give us a really exciting presentation, and I'm sure that you'll have lots of questions afterwards.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Shirley. I first want to thank Research Libraries UK for inviting me to be here today. It means a lot to take this time out with you all. I also want to thank all of the participants for being here today. I know that especially in the academic space, library space, archive space, we're all trying to wrap up our work for the end of the year. So just want to thank you for taking the time out. And thank you to Dr. John Connor Mulligan for being here today and telling us a bit about what's going on the ground in Barbados. So it is with profound joy and gratitude that I present this material to you today. Barbados has boldly taken a step forward in preserving its history through a pioneering program that reimagines how it interacts with the global cultural heritage space and tells its own story. So 3 years of lengthy Zoom calls, extensive research, imagining a digital ecosystem from afar, and site visits, the program has finally taken flight, and I'm overjoyed for that. So as we know, marginalized nations and communities often operate from a perpetual position of lack. It's just ongoing in the cultural heritage space. Bold investments flip the script here, and it means a lot to co-present some aspects of what has taken place. So I am no historian, but I do know that the shores of this beautiful island met souls that experienced unimaginable pain and loss, proceeding on to experience more. It is an honor to be a mere piece of the global effort to live in research in light of the true story of slavery and not in ignorance of it. We have spent the time since independence trying to give our people what the global North has taken for granted and has supported by the extraction of centuries of wealth for their people out of our blood, sweat, and tears. These words are by the Prime Minister of Barbados, and they underline the ongoing struggle to acquire what is often just available to the privileged. To me, this quote asserts that the time for extraction is over and it's beyond time to restore. So this is a document that I processed for Digital Library Ingest about 4 years ago. It's important to me because it is the first document that I ever saw following years of education that confirmed what I had heard but never saw documentary evidence of. Just a few lines here. My ancestors were considered to be equipment. The worth of my ancestors through the eyes of an enslaver and his estate inventory. And as you can see here, we have two enslaved individuals listed along with a saddle and a shotgun. It's important to see images like this, and we don't see enough of them. And then we also have to ask ourselves, what can we gain by facilitating the telling of new stories by new voices in conversations around enslavement and beyond? What stories are uncovered? We have to think about who is telling the stories. And in the past, stories around enslavement were told by people from privileged groups, and it's important to flip the script here. And I think that the effort in Barbados is beginning to do that. So this brings me to the star of the show here, the Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny project, or the ROAD program. The ROAD program is a comprehensive answer to developing a heritage economy. When I first started working with the government of Barbados, I kept hearing this term, heritage economy, heritage economy. What is that? To me, and the way that I understood it is, this is the idea that several areas of cultural heritage preservation should be enough to attract government level resources, as important as other areas that the economy, as important as other areas of the economy that generate tourism and global interest in Barbados. That cultural heritage should be enough to generate that interest, to generate revenue, and interest in Barbados beyond vacationing. The ROAD program involves digitization, archival management, and conservation, but the whole picture is much more. It's a memorial, it's a museum, it's a research hub, and recurring investment in Bajan knowledge workers for Barbados. And so there's opportunity here. And again, development of the knowledge economy, heritage economy. This is investing in new technology and infrastructure supported by an empowered Bajan workforce. Why is this important? It's important because we think about entities coming in from outside into a nation, a marginalized community, and saying, this is how you do what you do, and we're going to show you how to do it, and we're going to leave, and we're not going to check in with you, and we're going to extract. This initiative is fundamentally different because we have people there to show the Bajans how to do this work, but the point is making sure that they have the knowledge to develop their own knowledge economy and to grow over time and have Bajans teaching Bajans how to do this work. There's also research and innovation. This is asserting that Barbados can be a hub for research activity, innovation fueled by collaboration. And then there's also restoration and the retelling of stories in Barbados to attain cultural heritage data sovereignty. Very important. And so, when we think about reclaiming, right, we're thinking about reclamation in the past, present, and the future. This program is being designed to reach back for context, reach out to build relationships and knowledge, and forward towards sustainability. And you're going to hear sustainability be a recurring theme as we move through this presentation. Because without sustainability, what do you have? We have to think about continuity. How do we continue these activities in the future? How do we grow interest over time? How do we empower over time? All of that is wrapped into sustainability. So to me, something this large cannot be accomplished without a constant reevaluation of where they are and where they are going. And this sounds simple, right? But we know that work in the library and information science sphere is about information, sure, but this work is really about people. With people comes complexity, but also transformative opportunity. And when we're thinking about the past, this is seeking to repair by reclaiming narratives in the archives. And in the present, making sure the program remains, asserting that the program is globally relevant and reminding the global stage over and over again that Barbados can be a hub for research activity and showing folks how that happens over time. And in the future, considering the impact of centering Barbados in Atlantic history, it's important to think about how doing this work in this way is important and prioritizing the investment of cultural heritage knowledge. So, one moment here. So thinking about overcoming the barrier of cost and complexity. So this list here, the reason why I'm presenting this list is just to show you some of what organizations typically deal with. Marginalized communities struggle in these areas. The ones on the right here, the ones highlighted in red, are the ones that they struggle with the most. And the reason why I'm so excited about this is because this work is happening in a beautiful way because hardware and software, personnel, and sustainability have taken center stage and they're being taken care of well. So the ROAD program has overcome a lot through investment and already an immense amount of work, which John will be getting into later. This list is not exhaustive, but just shows some of the typical actors, right? These are hills to climb over. Even well-resourced institutions struggle with these areas, and marginalized nations and communities tend to struggle even more because of perpetual and chronic underinvestment in these areas over decades. This program takes an incredible amount of coordination and realignment, and that will consider pressure points. It is already ahead in many ways, and I'm just so proud of that. So let's get into the fun part here, the planning and preparation. So a considerable amount of thought has gone into scale and the specifics of what it would take to archivally manage and digitize hundreds of linear feet, possibly more. Here are some of the considerations that are included. We were thinking about how materials flow in and out, both digitally and physically, personnel down to material retrievers, custodians, and image processing techs, the specifics of high capacity and high performance networking and infrastructure, storage, combined with data capture rates and file sizes, thinking about how all of this would sing together. So thinking more about planning and preparation, a lot of research went into this. And this is just researching and advocating for high quality digitization systems. These systems are expensive, but they're high quality, they're robust. In all organizations, we have to communicate, why is this material important? Why is this equipment important? Why do we need to digitize to this quality? We had to communicate all of that, and we were heard. There was also evaluating spaces for data capture and physical material management. And then there's also initiating archival management and digital preservation conversations, coordinating program personnel, vendors, and services. And so what you're seeing here is a Google slide sketch that I did, just kind of thinking about how these different areas would work together. Where would shelving be? Where would digitization studios be? Thinking about adjacencies and proximities. If admin offices are there, where are they? If there's a reading room, where is that? Thinking about how individuals interact with this organization, with this effort. And so there's also recruiting for large-scale operations and planning for the continuation and preservation of knowledge. And so this is cross-training, as I mentioned before. Bajans training Bajans, and this is currently happening today. Drafting a pilot workflow, preparing spaces, and getting equipment operational. These are some images from some of the work that's been done. So initial workflows were drafted in theory and mostly remotely, but on-the-ground processes along with their modifications are being applied. So one thing that I also want to mention is that through much hard work and diligence right out of the gate, the digitization team was able to achieve FADGI 4-star compliance. And for those of you in the digitization space, especially in the States, you know how important this is. And it's really a source of pride. And Dr. Mulligan's team should be proud of themselves for that. And so following all of this work and preparation, a digital ecosystem is actively forming. And so with that, handing it over to you, John. Again, thank you all for being here and looking forward to Q&A.
Thank you, Jerrell. I don't know how to follow that. That was so beautiful. But I'll do my level best. So my name is John Mulligan. Although I worked in research computing for a while and always took advantage of my middle name to introduce myself as John Connor. And I'm here to save you from the machines. But seriously, a few years ago, we were asked to come to Barbados when we were at Rice and to assess the beginnings of a digitization project that promised to be quite transformative for the study of the history of the Atlantic world, for the slave trade specifically, of course, but more broadly for the long-term struggle for independence and self-determination in the region and what that meant for the original emergence, finance capitalism, and modernity, and what comes next. So when we came down, we were introduced to the archives and the singular collection here, and saw right off the bat just how much potential there was for that collection to change the way that people understood the world that we've come to inherit, and in many places, in many senses, from the place that it started. So having been introduced to the collection, we started to game out what it would look like to digitize the entirety of the archives, and to do it in a way where you weren't just taking pictures, but you were making that data discoverable, and you were doing it in a rich and interconnected way that could be iteratively improved and could be improved with, and this is key to what Jerrell was talking about at the beginning of the slides, with local knowledge and expertise, so that the story that you're telling isn't just a rehash of the old story with new materials. So back towards the beginning of the year, the project took me on as the director of digital operations here. And from day one, we brought in our photographers. We trained them in a bit of a crash course on the machines that we have, and then began writing in cooperation with our programming team in-house documentation for every one of our processes. So the first, a lot of what I'm going to show you today, there's a lot of stuff I can't show you. I can't show you a lot about our internal operations because it's all firewalled and everything has to be highly secure. But what I can show you is some of the early payoffs that we've got. And I can talk to you about some of the inputs on the other side. So we brought in a core of 10 photographer trainees. And within a week, they were good operators. And then we spent the next month working to improve quality scores. So we measure those every morning using Golden Thread. Our quality assurance team tracks the performance there. And we've gotten to the point now where those machines can be calibrated up to FADGI 4-star at 97% or above in under 10 minutes, which means that we don't have a lot of downtime, which is important because with the investment here, it's key that we maximize throughput. And also, it's important for people to feel productive and that they're not just stuck. Because if anyone knows the national motto of Barbados, pride in industry, and that is a real thing. It's wonderful to see just how much pride is taken in this important project by all the staff here. So that team then, to reiterate another of Jerrell's points, that core team then pivoted once they were to scientific standards, qualified as expert operators. They pivoted and wrote their own manual with our programming staff on a living document that lives on our servers on what our internal procedures are. Then that was shared with the next batch of photographer trainees, and they came in and studied under them for a couple of weeks and trained. And those who qualified were then brought on board for production, and we went into full swing. So that's about 6 weeks to bring up 28 qualified operators, which means that we can have, if anybody's sick, we don't necessarily have any downtime, and nobody has to be, sitting at the machine for 8 hours a day, overworked. We also have a metadata team who has trained up from our academic partners from an innovative use of Transcribus, where instead of having the machine do the transcription, we took some transcriptions that had been performed, and we had the team clean up a couple thousand pages in Transcribus, and that was their training bed along with the lecture series that we had for them to learn how to read 18th century handwriting, British, which is what constitutes the core collection here. So we have now about 30 people who can read 17th and 18th century handwriting and have been transcribing original documents that haven't been seen in decades. And that's really important in terms of making this collection discoverable. So taken all together, and what you're looking at here is like an early days schematic, because again, there's only so much I can share, but that was one of our early planning processes. What you have is we get from the cataloging of the original objects in the archives in archive space on a rolling basis. The conservation and collections management team are continually improving our finding aids, which are currently being used only in-house. And then we stitch it all together with middleware to work with Gooby, which is our digitization pipeline management system. And I cannot say enough good things about Gooby in Tranda. That team is absolutely brilliant. And so behind our firewall, we have the photographers pulling those records to tell them what they're digitizing, and then pushing those and marrying the digital images with the original archive space EAD files to create these digital objects over in Gooby Workflow. And then in Gooby Workflow, our metadata team is enriching those things and pushing them out to the viewer. And we're doing this on a rolling basis because it's behind the firewall. We can have a book leave the archives, come to photography, and be up on the viewer in the same day. And then we keep it in both our staging area, workflow, and in viewer. And we start to continually circulate the data out of viewer and into workflow through a bunch of middleware that we've created. No, I'm just talking you through this diagram before I get to some interesting uses of metadata. Thank you there, Marcia. So we circulate out of viewer over into workflow through a bunch of shims that we've made that allow our metadata team to be more efficient, and they work in cooperation all the time with our programmers, so that we're not creating definitive final digital copies that we're sitting on for months. We publish immediately, and then we republish and republish. And the benefit of that is that our programming team, our metadata team, our photographers, everybody can constantly be contributing to enriched digital documents that allows us to do human and machine analysis of simultaneously. In other words, because we live in this beautiful walled garden where everybody's contributing to the same project, what we end up with using our open source systems and our team of programmers is a continually enriched data set that takes full advantage of the fact that everything that we build and everything that we've installed has an API. So now, thank you. Yeah, you got my cue. All right. So now what I want to show you here is one of the pieces of in-house middleware that we made, right? So if you start from archive space, if anyone's gone into the back end of that, they actually have a rather robust API. But to get the data out of there and then back into there in a customized way that takes it, that can take into account all of your internal processes, just about everybody who works in this field ends up having their own workarounds, no matter what system you use. One of the first things that I did when they brought me on was ban spreadsheets. And not literally, but what we would do is anytime we found someone using a secret spreadsheet, because everyone's got them, we would go over and we would sit down with them and we would say, what are you recording in your spreadsheet? Why is that useful to you? And then in these client meetings, we would come to understand more about whatever it was in their workflow that we didn't understand. Then we would go and we would start to build them a customized application that would allow them to do that job better with data validation, and to do it in a way that other people could have access to the same data. What you're looking at here is what's called our digital object tracking system, and essentially it sits between archive space and Gooby, right? So our finding aid and our digitization pipeline and metadata enrichment pipeline. That allows our conservation team and our digitization team to all understand the objects that they're working on is essentially the same, right? That these digital objects that we're creating are twins of the physical objects. And this allows those teams to be touching the same authoritative records of each one of these to track their workflows and to make sure that if there is any data drift, it gets identified immediately, and then gets exposed back out via what you're not seeing here is the API on the back end of this, so that we actually have Jupyter notebooks that we've built that do data visualizations of all of our processes, our timings, our work backlogs and stuff, which is really good for reporting, but it's also good for the team to be able to run one of these notebooks real quick on their laptop, identify, a pocket of work that needs to be done, or if they don't understand something, to walk across the building and ask what's happening. So in other words, we took all of this disparate information and we centralized it into this application. And this is just one of our pieces of in-house middleware that we use in order to basically keep everybody on the same page and to be more effective in what they do. Jerrell, could we jump to the next one? Cool, thanks. Then, once you have all of this data in this rich ecosystem and it's all exposed for people who have the keys to it, right? What you start to realize is that this data, all these data points should be talking to each other. And one of the more transformative things about this project, in our opinion, is going to be finding known people, places, things, events that are of historical significance, and as rapidly as possible, connecting them with as few errors as possible to the original documents that we're digitizing. And marrying that image data with that metadata, right, is there are a million different ways to do it. But in order to figure out exactly how to do it best for your workflow, you have to have some real data to chew on. And so at very early on, while we were waiting for some of the data to come online, we wanted to get our programmers up on building those sorts of interfaces that stitch image data and metadata together. And unfortunately, we're partners with Slave Voyages, which Jerrell and I both have worked with for a long time. And I wrote the API for the new version of Slave Voyages and had come across this really interesting problem last year where we found that there were all of these documents in IIIF format that were sitting at the National Archives and Records Administration that we had referenced at Slave Voyages on our records of voyages that were coming into New Orleans, and then some that were leaving New Orleans. These are individual ship manifests. As you can see, it's microfiche reels on the right. But they were just, runs of images. They hadn't been segmented into tables of contents or anything. So what we did was we created a little app here where it would display those runs of images on the right. And on the left, it would hit the Slave Voyages API and allow you to search through voyage records, right? And so what that does is it allows you to quickly look at an image, right? Using the IIIF API to pull that image up, move over, find the corresponding voyage, connect them, and move on. And so this stopped someone from having to have and I swear this is how it happened, 2 separate spreadsheets on one screen, 2 web interfaces on another, and copying and pasting a whole bunch of links between them when they weren't pulling their hair out, right? And so doing it this way allows you to collect it in a temporary database. We're just saving it as JSON, and then have it ready to dump out and inject into the database. And so by working with our academic partner institutions on a known data problem, our programmers were able to skill up, much as our transcribers were able to skill up by using the transcribers data. They were able to skill up by taking this open data and then making a custom application for it. And what I can't show you is what we have in-house that we're building to do something very similar here on our metadata enrichment workflow. So by working with our partner institutions, we've been able to sort of rapidly skill up what our programmers can do and then pivot, and now we're working on our own data. Yes, please, Jerrell. So another thing that we can do, because everything is accessible through APIs behind the firewall here, what we've been able to do is we started to experiment with visualizing the metadata that our team is surfacing. And so our programmers started experimenting with D3 a while ago. And what you're looking at here is an attempt to visualize some complex data. Can you pause it after she comes back to the graph, Jerrell, just for a moment? Oh, hit play again. Let it play out. Yeah. Okay, now hit pause. Okay, so what you're seeing here is that our programmer Vivine she wrote a React app here, and what it does is it goes to Gooby Viewer. It asks, hey, what records do you have? It pulls those records. Then it looks for the tables of contents of them and reads the METS files that are exposed through them. And it builds a D3 force-directed network graph that shows you the structure of all of the tagged entities in that METS file that we've got codes for. So what you see there in the center is the volume in which a bunch of subsidiary document structures are situated, and attached to which are some individuals who have roles. So what you're looking at there specifically is one of the deed volumes, the original copied deeds, and this was the ledger where people's deeds were recorded in the order that they were filed for official purposes. And so inside of one of these old volumes, dating back to 1647, what you have are, you know, 1 or 2 pages, or sometimes up to 10 pages, that describe that transcribe a deed. So our team has been segmenting those, transcribing them, tagging individuals, and as a result of all of this, we're able to start visualizing that data in a way that allows you to then click through and jump directly to that document structure. And so as we add more of that data, this thing will start to look a lot less radial like that, but instead we'll start to see the structures of people's interconnections. And why don't we jump ahead, Jerrell? Just because I think I'm yammering a little bit. Okay. Also, there's not just metadata, there's image data, right? What we have is all of these IIIF images, right, that are tiled, that are immediately available from the server. And the question is, what do you start to do with that when you, apart from looking at it as a book? We all love the book viewers where you get the facing pages and everything, right? But then you start to think, well, you have those you have those gallery tiles that allow you to like skim forward through the book and then, you know, click in and see that individual image page. But when you're taking tens of thousands of photographs at pretty high, you know, tens of thousands of photographs like every couple of weeks at 600 PPI, and generating just terabytes upon terabytes of data, and all of it's available on a IIIF compliant image server alongside of your metadata, then you start to ask yourself, you know, is thinking about this thing as a book really the only way to come at it? And that network graph sort of gets at that a little bit, as you can see people linked across documents. But you can also start to look at it as just for, you know, how beautiful it is, right, aesthetically. So what we're looking at here is something. I'm sorry, it's a souvenir program that came from the private collection of Sir Garfield Sobers, leading up to the installation of a Cricket Legends exhibit before the World Cup just a couple months ago, and so his private collection was in there, and the conservation team was helping to work on it. And we had the privilege of digitizing it. And we started to look at all of this. We asked, you know, what do you do with all of this image data? And we decided that a simple thing to do would be to create a sort of infinite image gallery that would grow as our project grew. And then we decided to get a little bit more fancy, which is what you're looking at now. And what we've got here is a test bed for a draft of our public-facing website. So sneak peek. And you can see what our team did here. We're using IIIF annotations alongside a customized Open Sea Dragon viewer, where when you hover over, it goes to areas of interest progressively. It takes you on a little tour of the image, right? So this image gallery is highly interactive, and allows people to see up in the cloud that some of the technical prowess, some of the technology that's going on here when we can't, when we can't for the time being share everything, right? People can get a peek at the sorts of things that we're doing. And can you jump forward a little bit, Jerrell? In the video.
This is the last slide, John.
Yeah, but I think it goes beyond beyond these tiles at the beginning. There we go. Thank you. Maybe my video was lagging. Sorry, I wasn't seeing it. So what we're looking at here is we want to tell stories about the digitization that's being done, the collections here, and so we have what you can think of as a sort of very image forward IIIF leveraging blog, where we're going to build out stories about each of the components of the project and show people some of the actual work product. So you can imagine that if we have one of these, and you won't have to imagine for long, but when we have one of these original deeds that shows, to one of Jerrell's earlier slides, the transfer of property, part of which, includes enslaved people who lived in that place. Obviously, when we have one of these older documents, one of the things that this thing is going to zoom in on is that person's name, right? And that's important in a place as small as this, because you see the same names coming up all the time. And it's not just people's inherited names, it's also that people, like, quite often you'll find that families have lived in a neighborhood for a very, very, very long time. We have pretty frequent what we call story days. We have one next week before the holidays, where our metadata team comes together and presents to everybody else about the things that they've been finding in the documents. And they get up and they'll show a specific page and talk people through it. And one of the things that keeps happening is people keep finding their relatives in the 1891 census. And they'll see a name, they'll go, gosh, that's just that's my great aunt's maiden name. And then they'll see that on the next page, then they'll see like their great uncle, his name, and then they flip back and they realize that it's in the neighborhood that those people came from, right? And so people have in real time here stumbled across their family tree, right? And so when that's done more programmatically, by allowing more people to come in and start doing searches, right, on their own, then I think it's going to really transform how cultural heritage is understood locally, but also because of the centrality of Barbados to the British Empire's early fortunes and the inheritances that happened overseas on those fortunes. I think it's going to have a global impact as well. It's just it's a privilege to sort of see the first fruits of it, so early, and from people who I work with. Yeah, so I hope what we've shown you here is that we've taken we've taken an ambitious goal and in relatively short order realized some pretty powerful early achievements in that, by empowering the people who do the work here, whether they're photographers, whether they're the people who keep the systems running, whether they're transcribing, whether they're marking up documents with names on a more structural level, whether they're programming middleware, whether they're remediating documents. Everybody is working together, shifting between teams when necessary, and coming to understand what other people are doing through a process of collaboration and innovation. Yes. So thank you. I have not been keeping my eye on the clock, so I'm just hoping against hope that I didn't talk more than my allotted time.
Oh, thank you, Jerrell and John. That was absolutely fabulous. Such an insight into what is happening. Sorry, my camera's not on. Such an insight into what is happening on this program. And I think, what shines through, and I can actually confess now to everyone that I am directly connected to Barbados, so this means a lot to me. I think that what you really are talking about here is allowing a community to take agency for their own history, to actually be partners and leaders in that process. And actually through that process, you are enabling them to derive and show interconnections and stories that perhaps others who came into that space would never have seen, because they are so invested in this, because this is a story that has not been told for them. And this is a way of actually coming to grips with it. So I know that I'm, over the moon that this work is being done. And I really want to commend you and thank you for the contribution that you've made today to share this with our audience. I'm looking here to see if you've got any immediate questions. I've got a couple of questions, so I'll come back and say anything else later. So let me have a look and allow others to speak. William Nixon, fantastic work. Next steps. What are some of the next steps and challenges for these collections? I don't know if Jerrell or John, who would like to take that?
Go ahead, John.
Sure thing. Yeah, so some of the next steps are scaling. And
I had a feeling that would be your answer, but
yeah. It's I mean it's already the clip is already pretty ambitious. But there was a day the other week where we digitized 11,000 pages. At Fadji 4-star 600 PPI. So it's so we know we can do it, but you got to be realistic as well, right? Once we hit that inflection point, then I think that really the most interesting thing that I think we're gonna come across here in terms of a challenge and an opportunity is figuring out what the right balance is between automation and curation. And that's why I snuck into my bio at the beginning there, Alan Liu talking about informating, right? Instead of automating. It's because it's sort of core to our philosophy here, where you try to increase the information flow between all the different people who are working on something in order for them to course correct, right? So problems get flagged earlier, but also to find areas of untapped value that you can realize faster and in transformative ways. Like someone's going to see something that other people didn't realize were valuable because they were a little bit siloed in their own work, right? And so that cross-pollination is incredibly valuable. When it comes to automating, right, like doing automatic transcriptions of documents or stuff, or named entity recognition, right? You don't want to just have a machine crank that stuff out. And that's not just because it makes mistakes, and I'm not being precious about the documents here. It's because there's actually lost value when you decide to not have people read the things, right? Like if you're a humanist and if you're legitimately in the humanities and like you produce this great digital collection that nobody ever reads, then that's like a bad Borges story, right? Like that's not what we're supposed to be doing. This is not just about humans, it's for humans, right? And when you have that middle layer of people who are touching the documents all day long, then I think you get more out of what we tend to call automation. Not that I'm opposed to, processes that can help individuals and collectives scale up their effectiveness. So yeah, finding an ethical balance between automation and curation is a big one for me now that we're getting a lot of data coming through. I hope that's not too narrow. Sorry.
Thank you. Just wondering, one of the questions we have here is, would you be interested in ingesting digitized material from UK archives? Not sure who would like to take that.
What you got?
Uh,
I will say, I mean, if we're talking about, decolonizing the archives, there are a lot of items that you could, to put it as mildly as possible, they have relevance to the history of Barbados and should in some form be included. There are, I mean, you could put it this, all right, like here's an example. You've got a will of you've got a Quaker will of a London merchant from the 1750s, right? And then you've got a deed from the late 1740s over in Barbados, and the one speaks to exactly how the wealth that was inherited in the other was produced. To my mind, those things really should be connected. Yes.
Thank you very much. One of the questions that's come through is in terms of what you consider to be the major challenging task of the project, and how have you handled it?
So I'll say in the chat, one of the things that I wrote, just from a consulting perspective and pre-work stages, I would say coordination and timeline, which is just a lot of communication. Not everything can be planned for at once. I feel like, John, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like we need to plan a bit and kind of watch things unfold to plan the next step so that each of the following steps will be informed by like what we've learned together as a team. I mean, it was multiple conversations that just unfolded over the course of what, 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really helpful. Yeah, John?
Yeah, that's totally correct. And I think we got to a good place where it wasn't one conversation blocking the other, that A had to come before B, but instead, there got to be enough trust and common and common language where a bunch of different possibilities were able to be floated at the same time without it becoming distracting. And then we could build this organic picture of the best way to construct the program on the digitization side. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of like consensus and realignment.
I think one of the questions that I've got is around this sustainability element, and the wonderful work you're doing in terms of training people to be able to continue and actually deliver on the program. And I think one of the things I'm wondering about is, are there areas that we're struggling to actually develop? I mean, do we have enough of the people with perhaps your skills, John, or do you have people with programming skills? And are those areas being addressed? So it was great to hear about how you had built the photographers and the manual and things like that. But I'm just wondering more broadly about the availability of those kinds of skills in a long-term sense, and broader archival, trained archivists. I know that we do have there are some trained archivists in Barbados, but I think one of the issues that we raise is always the personnel and having enough of those people with those skill types.
Yeah, I'll say that we like we've been really lucky here with the people who came to work with the project. The the programmer team, we started everyone with okay, and I've been really lucky. So um you've got big data meeting, humanities data, and you've got um, you've got a programming team sitting in the middle of it. And so what the approach that I took was to start things off by doing software carpentries trainings and by getting everybody to, it sounds simple, but like getting everybody to just use Git together. So that when they were doing their little, exercises or experiments, people would always have to, they would always have to, yeah, that's a good metaphor. They would have to resolve conflicts, right, during their merges on Git. But like, getting people to work together, getting people to write these digital manuals together in order to explain back what you're doing means that you can't have people break out and claim something all as their own, and then that affects the sustainability of it, right? Because there's not enough discussion about it. No one else knows how it works. I think we've hit a critical point with the programmers here, where like they've learned and self-taught, right? So many different interesting technologies, but they've done it on image data and archival metadata, like all coming at them from standards-based APIs. And so they're really, really good programmers now. Not accept that, but like the dream here has like sort of been realized that they're really good library science programmers, right? Which is just crazy. I mean, I
Which
think
means that they're unstoppable. That's what that means.
I also told them, like, if you can program with this kind, like if you can deal with this kind of data, like everything's easy. Don't worry, it's fine, right? But like, yeah, this group I think would understand that. But you tell like engineers about that, and they're not gonna, they're gonna be a little nonplussed. But yeah, we have a bunch of ninjas here who are really, really good at what they do, and they're trained up in something that a lot of other people see as niche, but those people don't understand just how much good data there is, like, coming out of library information science. So I think it's been good for the programmers, and I think that, adds value to them for their jobs. But
and just briefly, I just want to say how excited I am that John has been able to kind of bring in this data analysis and visualization and just, computing infrastructure into this project because, at the beginning, as a digitization professional, I was just so focused on, how do we get the best digitization system and make images look as beautiful as possible, and thinking about metadata as well. But, kind of in my world, there's this you have your digitized image and then you have accompanying descriptive metadata, and then you're asking people to kind of make those connections, beyond the, collocative properties between the metadata. But, what this program is saying is not only are we going to give you beautiful images and descriptive metadata, but we're going to show you what all of this means. Let me contextualize this for you and make these connections, which I think is just immensely important. And so I think that development is going to serve Barbados well. And I mean, like I said, I mean, if you have library and information science professionals that are also programmers, I mean, the folks that I know that have both those skill sets are really unstoppable because you're marrying these two fields that just go really well together. So I just want to commend John and his team on what they've been able to accomplish here.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you if you might, Jerrell and John, to maybe just consider this question and maybe put something into the chat whilst I close up this event. This was a question from someone who was commending the work and just thinking how wonderful it was. And I think that now we've got someone wanting to go to visit Barbados on heritage tourism. So hey ho, job done. Will there be exhibitions in the future? And if you can just maybe comment on what you think about that. Do you think that there'll be exhibitions of this work in the future, online or otherwise? Then that will be great. I think people will be interested in that. I think the other thing I'm thinking about is this likely to be commercialized? But that's another question. And you can either answer that or not. We can always take that offline. I want to take this opportunity now to really thank everyone who has attended this wonderful session. I want to really thank our two speakers, John and Jerrell, for bringing this alive, this whole program that's taking place in terms of, showcasing and bringing alive the heritage really of Barbados, and sharing it not only with the world, but perhaps more importantly with the people of Barbados, because I know that they are outside of that. But that sharing of this heritage across the world, and helping us all to understand better the histories and how things have come to be, I think is one of the most important aspects of this project. And I'll say it again, I think building in those sustainability issues into this project has been absolutely pivotal and remarkable, and has been really well thought through.